Welcome to today's episode of Feeding the Wolf of Possibilities. Today we're exploring the art of creating your life. Such a seemingly simple thing, something we should all be shown how to do from the very day we're born. And yet, it is one of the biggest and most rewarding challenges of our lives. Finding out what's true for us and then actually choose to create it. As our guide, I've invited Kalpana Raghuraman, in my point of view, a master of life creation. She's an international performer, choreographer, dance mentor, as well as a brilliant access consciousness facilitator. Come along. What would change in the world if you, me, and everyone choose to feed the wolf of possibilities instead of the one of doubt, distrust, and despair? The way I see it, our point of view creates reality, not the other way around. Somewhere deep within, I think we know that. In this podcast, I am daring you to claim this remarkable superpower. Join us and be inspired by trackers, explorers, and finders of possibilities from the multiverse of hope. Welcome to the podcast, Feeding the Wolf of Possibilities, with your host, Katarina, Wallentin. So welcome, Kalpana.
You're making me blush. Hi, Katarina. Lovely to be on with you.
Hello. So what is creating your life to you? What does it mean?
I get that it's a combination of really listening to whispers of like things that ping you, and then not necessarily having to act on them, but like also then asking questions on even like, is it now or later? Like, is it information for the future or for now? And playing with what's showing up, and like really it's connected to committing to your life for me. It's because there's, whatever we do, you might want to start a shop to sell clothes, or you might want to start an IT business, whatever it is in your life that you do, or you have kids. That's all creation of life. And things show up that seem to not work or difficult. And in a way, those things can be seen as a proof that it's not working. Like, oh no, I shouldn't do this. It's hard, right? And it could be, but there's a lot of things that if you commit to your life, you also know when to keep going. And for me, that's the energy of creating your life. And the art of that is like, you just keep going. You go right, you go left, you go up, you go down. You just play with what shows up, and you don't let that stop you or make that doubt yourself, which is of course a big art, not doubting yourself.
Well, that was one of my questions. Like, how do you know what to choose, and what do you do when you start doubting? Like, what's your tool for when you go into, I don't know, maybe not that place that is the place of doubt?
Yeah. I mean, I just started 2 days ago with a new dance creation with my dance company, which is like my yearly testing and strengthening my muscle of trusting myself, because you have an idea for a performance, you have no music yet, you have dancers in front of you, and you have some ideas, and then you have to really try things and play with them, and then take what you like and leave what you don't like, and trust yourself. So my go-to with when doubt shows up is a lot of the access tools, but one of them, if you're not sure if you want to do something, yes or no, is to choose one of them. Like, let's say, okay, I'm going to go for this. And I allow that choice to kind of resonate in my world, and even let that choice be there for a day. And then you see what energies show up with that choice. Because every choice, we say in access, right? Choice creates. Like literally, if I choose to do this now, I'm going to go have a date with a guy or whatever. That choice resonates something. It starts to activate something in my world. And I let that show itself to me for a day, or sometimes 2 days, and sometimes an hour, because it's so clear. Like, oh, and then I do the other one, like, okay, I'm not going to do it. And then that shows up something. And that's one of my tools when I'm really like, then that's one of my favorite tools, to let that choice really, show me what it is.
Well, it's interesting because if you look at it, there's another part you're doing. You're also receiving. There's something with that receiving. And when I watch you and how you're creating your life, one of the things that I'm struck by is often how much you're willing to receive from everything that shows up. So when did you learn to receive, or how did you learn to receive?
I love that. I love how you see that. And it's actually, um, I always say, whatever shows up, use it. Like what I have it with dance, all I've had it with myself because I used to perform, and I remember I had once I sprained my ankle, and I was a guest performer for in London. Like I was the only foreign person that were flying in, and I was like, shit, I have broken ankle kind of thing. And I was like, it was really light to not cancel. And I was doing a solo on Frida Kahlo, and I was like, oh, she had a lot of body stuff. So I used it and I changed my solo. And the stuff that I changed, I kept it even when my ankle got healed again. So it's also like, yeah, really use whatever shows up, what seems to be a mistake, what seems to be like random. It can show you so many things. So that's one thing. And when you ask me, like, when did you learn to receive? I think I watched my mother a lot. My mother is my first dance teacher. I was a terrible student. I was the one who was like getting in trouble all the time because I was chatting, or I was, I was just really naughty. But I did see her be super present with bodies. She wasn't a teacher who was like, this is the right way. She would always respond to what matched the dance students. Some I'm kind of thinking that I saw a lot of that, and it showed me something. I've been on stage since I'm very young.
Mm.
Um, I think that's been also like the whole thing of doing it right on stage. When you're 5, you have no fucking idea what that is. Sorry for the fucking. You have no idea what that is. So you just go, right? And so there, I think when I look at that now, when you ask me, I think that's where I was just like, oh yeah, this, and then this, and then this. And at that age, you don't know yet that you should be judging yourself, or you should be not receiving certain energies from people.
What do you think your mom was different in the way that she didn't teach you how to judge?
Well, I think that she was I think like any field, but definitely in the arts, there's a lot of politics, and she stayed away. She was very not interested. She did get impacted by people like being mean to her and stuff, and I saw that. And I would I think I watched a lot of that happen. And I saw also, she always used to say, like, be like a lotus. A lotus is in water but never gets like, it never sinks by it. Like the water just stays on top of it. It doesn't get absorbed by it. So I saw her kind of be in a different way.
And
Yeah.
there were two things you were saying when you talked about your performance in London, right? So one was your mom's present with bodies, like the presence of bodies, and then the second thing is use what you use what you're given, use whatever comes up. So
Yeah.
for me, that is also part of this art of creating your life. So there are two, the presence, and then also not making things wrong that show up. Like instead looking, how can I use this to my advantage? Or how can I use this? So could you talk a little bit about how that actually is part of how you create the presence and the instead of problem, possibility? Two big things, I know.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting what you're saying, because when you talk about the receiving, if you're really receiving, like even the stuff, like you said, like that we could make wrong, if you go like, oh, wow, well, hey, okay, then the using everything to your advantage, allowing everything to contribute to whatever you're creating is actually really receiving. So
Yeah.
even like, okay, you sprained your ankle. Oops. Okay, well, now what can we do with that? The whatever, right? Like so many things show up in life, and that is actually, I would say, receiving. And sometimes you change your course because things show up differently, and that's the where I really play a lot with asking questions. Sometimes you have to go like, no, 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 this is really clear for me, so we need to be something different or activate something different to allow this to show up, because I'm really clear that this is what I require. And that is also a dance, right? But I think it's the receiving thing of using everything that shows up, and that takes you away from right and wrong. It also really trains your muscle of flexibility, like adapting or whatever you want to call that, because it makes you resilient. It makes you resilient to respond in the moment and not be like, no, 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 I want this, and I wrote this, and it should be like that, and I see this, and it should be, and this is not it, so it's wrong. The resilience allows you to just bounce back and go, okay, let's go, okay, let's go, okay, let's go. And it just allows you to use and play with what shows up. So I think it's a combination of receiving and responding to
It's
that.
like receiving, it's nearly like you have a resilience of choosing.
Well, yeah, and it's interesting because I remember 2 years ago in the certified facilitators training in Rome, where we had the course with the founder of Access, Gary Douglas, and I said something about that I love to create, and he said, "No, you love to choose," and that like hit me, like I was like, "Oh my God!" And we say in Access, right, like you choose, and that's what shows up, and really acknowledging like, hey, it's your choice that creates, and then when you say like, hey, the receiving, and then choosing with that information, with that awareness, with that whatever shows up, is where your creative power gets strengthened. I really get that it's the more we choose, the more our creative power gets strengthened, and you can choose in different ways.
It's interesting because it's not until this past year that I really got that the moment of creation actually occurs when you choose. It all the rest is an actualization of that choice that you've already created in the moment you actually choose. And that's such a it's like a something that's really hard to grasp. And once you do, you can see also where this creation of your life actually comes from. You love to choose.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's something for me that I've had from a young age. Curiosity, like we've all had it, and we've not always been encouraged to be curious. And I think that in that way, just and a lot of the things, how many things did you dream of when you were young that you then put away in the impossible box, like, oh, not happening, but it's still there, it's still like alive. Just because it's a box doesn't mean it disappeared, and I think that's also where the more we allow ourselves to choose, the more we don't have to be in the impossible possible, but we're only just in, hey, which one? What now? What now?
Well, another thing that you do that I also really admire is that you have this way of including instead of going to either or in your life. So, for example, you keep dance as one of your main areas of expression, as well as facilitating consciousness. So one doesn't exclude the other. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think that's for sure. There's moments that there's more energy on one or the other, but that's connected for me with expanding your zone of awareness. So I will be in the studio and rehearsing with the dancers, and suddenly I'll get a ping about a class, and I'll write my host like, hey, what happened to that question I had? Or hey guys, can we do a live? So I allow the information to come anywhere. So and so one creation does not exclude the other creation in a way. So my dance company doesn't exclude my access creations don't exclude my dance creations. And then what I started to really, in a way, I would say actively choose is allowing them to contribute to each other. Because I know for sure in the beginning, I was a bit like trying to see how to do that. And then I was like, what am I doing? It's all me. So why should, it's all expression of me. So then I started to allow them to contribute to each other. But it's really for me extended, like I remember I've had like classes, and in lunch break, I was talking to the PRA manager to check the text that was really not working. And, like just allowing those worlds to fuse and not saying like, oh no, now I'm in a class, so I cannot think about dance things, or, but really allowing that to interplay like you do when you have kids. I don't have kids, but I know you have to kind of with kids because they're just there all the time, and, and you do whatever you have to do. So it's kind of that energy.
So has it always been like that for you, or is it a muscle that you've trained over the years?
I think it's been it's really interesting how when you ask questions, I'm realizing things about myself, like, oh, but I have always been dancing. I used to I used to dance myself. Now I'm mostly choreographing. So I work with the dancers in the studio, but I'm not performing hardly. And so also not training every day, etc. But I used to do that. And I was studying anthropology, and I was still dancing, and I would go for tours, or I would go to India to study, and I was also still studying. And then afterwards I got a job at the TV and the radio. I was a researcher, but I was still dancing. So somehow, and there were moments that I was like, what should I do with my dance? And then the dance would be like, hello, or my body would be like, hello, of course you want to do this. So it's kind of always been there. And there's been a flexibility in in a way that has allowed me to include it. And there's been moments that I was only dancing. I've had moments that I was really not doing anything else. And then something would show up again and I would be like, hey, happy to include it. So I think has allowed me to always have that expanded zone. And then it's definitely training muscle, like definitely.
And I'm wondering also, sometimes you have too little to do, and then you basically stop doing anything. Like it's one of those where instead of going, oh, I need to take away things, adding things will actually increase your capacity to create. So could you explore that a bit? Like, what is that about that you add more things instead of, you know, streamlining your creation?
So really, well, I think I love that whole, perspective of adding, because we've always learned like, oh no, you have too many things, you should reduce it so you can be more present with each thing, which is a bit what we learn, right? Like do one thing and then do the other thing. And for many of us, that doesn't work. And then we think we're so terrible, but it just doesn't work. You can't do one thing the whole time only. But I think with the adding things, it's also that interplay of how those elements contribute to each other. So, you can be working on a text for maybe an hour and then you're done. And then you could go like garden. And then suddenly it's like, oh, wait, I had an idea for a class. So I'm going to talk to my team. And then, oh, I wanted to look at the video for the rehearsal tomorrow. So it's kind of like allowing everything to ping and allowing your 24 hours a day actually to be, how can I say that?
Alive?
Yeah, exactly. For that to be, because if you don't have many things, how many of us go like, I'm just gonna have a tea now, and then and then I remember that I was, when you make a solo for yourself, that's really when you confront a lot of yourself because you're just sitting alone in the studio, and then you're like, I think I'm gonna have a break in my break, like kind of a thing. But it's really this thing like there's not so much, and then you kind of don't do anything, and when there's more. I really get that they activate each other and they activate you. And so there's this play and it's like this kind of like, it's not the stress of on your toes, but it's more like, yeah, I'm alive and all the molecules are vibrating in my body, but in my life. And all those projects are talking to each other. And I don't have to do one thing the whole time. And sometimes you're sitting on the couch for 5 hours watching Netflix because you're addicted to a series. But after that, you have like all the ideas and you just need 30 minutes to write your thing that would have taken you 4 hours,
Exactly. Well, and then so let's also, because I could hear, people listening going, oh, I have so much to do. So, we have this, we call the rat race, right? It's getting in there. And I sometimes even have the sense that sometimes efficiency is like a drug. We get like high from ticking off another thing on like to-do list. So how do you not get pulled into that? Or do you get pulled into that and have to take yourself out of that, like doing rat race where you just like, have to get this done now?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question for me this week because I'm having like 2 crazy weeks of like, this is my first morning that I didn't have anything like, and I'm having late nights every evening because there's all the shows and blah, blah. But it's really like for me, like if you allow this energy of relaxation, then whatever that list is, it's different. Because that list, like I love notebooks because I just like to be able to physically go done, and it's not the same when you delete it in your phone from the notes, I just really want to go. So I get that. And I really get that it's the relaxation part. And when I notice that I'm getting too much on this, I really go, hey, I just cancel something. I'm like, hey, what is really required? And some things are not required. Okay, hey, can we move this and give myself that space? And as soon as I have a little bit of space, I'm already like super fine. It's weaving that relaxation into everything you do, which doesn't always seem so obvious because, yeah, it's a rat race and everybody's running. So how can you, it's like walking swiftly, but with a relaxed, you can be very swift. But there's a relaxation in that instead of the running and then tiring yourself out.
When you're saying that, what I realized is you're saying, because I am very similar to you, I will maybe cancel something, which will give me more space. And that little more space allows me then to relax. And it's nearly like I'm relaxing in to the fact that I have choice because I have the choice to cancel something. Yeah. So I'm wondering also, if you could dive a little bit more into this relaxation, because I think that relaxation is like a key to also the presence, the persistence of choice that we talked about in the beginning.
I really think relaxation is super, super important for me. Also, I can see that when I'm relaxed, then people are even like, oh my God, there's so many things. And I'm like, I know. It's like, yeah, we all know we have a lot to do, but like stressing about it is not going to make it less. It's just going to make it harder. And of course, that's like, we haven't really learned to relax. It's even like, oh my God, can you show me how to relax so I can do it? You know, like we like, hurry up? I don't have time for this relaxation thing. Can you teach me quickly? You know, but it's really, sometimes it's really just watching your breath or, yeah, taking a moment. Sometimes it's hard to talk about relaxation because it's such a choice of space and choosing, but it's for me also really connected to trusting yourself, because how many of us have learned that if you relax, everything gets a mess, you know, things fall apart, then things don't work, then you have like double the work because you just relaxed. And it's like, it's not being passive, it's really, you're still present, but you're literally just allowing breath to come through your own body and through your life.
How do you learn to trust yourself?
That's, I think, one of the big ones in life, right? Like how to trust yourself. Also be willing to make a mess. And yeah, right. And in some way not listen too much to other people. Because a lot of times we know, you know, how many times after the thing happened and then you're like, oh, fuck, I knew this. It's like, yeah, we know so much. And then we get very much confused by other people's perspectives or opinions. And trusting yourself is really having your own back, relaxing into yourself, but also just really like, yeah, this at this moment, this is what I get is going to work. And then if it doesn't, it's like, okay, I know then that didn't work.
But has it always been like that for you, like since you were a kid?
No, I don't think so. I mean, if I look at myself, I've been a very kind of curious monster and just done so many things. I went to India for like 10 months or nearly a year to research for my anthropology master's, and I was dancing, and I think I always say I'm just like, I'm too naive to be afraid. So I'm like, you know, or I went to West Africa. I went to Mali for 3 months to learn dance just because I saw this amazing performance. And I was like, I want to learn that. And my parents were all like, oh my God, you're going to Africa alone. And I was like, why would that be a problem? So I think that's part of like, when you don't know that you should be worried, then that's, you know, in a way the best place, because it kind of, you're not stupid. You're not going to go, you know, in the city to a dangerous area all by yourself and go, I'm not afraid, because that isn't, you know, not being aware. But I think it's definitely just really been muscle training, because of course, you know, the doubt monsters come for you, and then you have to just really work on it. And the access tools are just the most phenomenal tools for that. If there's anything that can change that, it's access tools for me. Yeah.
So if you could, before we end, if you could give people listening, we've talked about so many different aspects of creating your life and so many different tools, but if you could give them just one tool to play with, if they have the sense that they don't really know how to create their life, what would you give them to start with?
What lights you up? And that could be like really something random, but whatever it is that lights you up, allow that to have a place in your life. And you might be an accountant and you love knitting. Knit, you know, like allow that energy that lights you up into your world and foster it. Give it, you know, plant the seed and give it water, like foster it, give it time, nourish it, don't judge it, and allow it to speak to you. And well, it's speaking to you, listen to what it's saying. That's what I would say. And like, it's really like, you can't mess up. That's the beautiful thing. Like, if it's not working, that's like, okay, didn't work. Good to know. It's like, it's nearly, if you take it as, I took an apple, but actually I wanted a banana, you know, the world didn't collapse. Kind of like, just don't make it, you know, give yourself that reprieve. Just be easy on yourself. Yeah.
Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you so much. And I am so looking forward to what will get created next in your life.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
What else is possible? Thank you
so much. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you so much for listening to my podcast, Feeding the Wolf of Possibilities. I hope you have more space in your world now. If you would like to listen to earlier episodes, share with other people, or subscribe, please go to Spotify, iTunes, or visit katarinawallentin.com/wolf.